Are you sleeping on Josh Downs because of his recent injuries? If I were you, I wouldn't. And I'm Matt Donnelly, and this is Fantasy Football Quick Hits. And today we're going to take a look at my top 5 fantasy football wide receiver sleepers. The time to get locked on is right now. And first up, the aforementioned Josh Downs. No doubts he had been gaining all kinds of hype leading to Colts training camp. However, we saw him suffer a bit of a groin injury that's kind of put a bit of a stop to that as of late. But I'm not too worried because considering the fact that Alec Pierce remains on the PUP after having offseason ankle surgery, and the Colts haven't signed a veteran wide receiver, and yes, I'm looking at you, Keenan Allen, right here in the camera. Keenan Allen, still a free agent. Hey, are you concerned? No, I'm not concerned because scared money does not make any money when we're talking about fantasy football. What is the appeal for Downs? It all comes down to PPR scoring formats. Josh Downs should be a favorite target of fantasy managers as they prepare for the 2026 drafts. Alec Pierce, we talked about that. Huge contract. However, where's he getting this money? What's he getting this money for? I mean, he's got barely more receptions in the season than I do. We're talking about 50 receptions. He hasn't even done that once in any of his 4 seasons. Meanwhile, Downs, if you're looking at his record and what he's done, 55-plus receptions, 4 consecutive seasons. Now, if we take a look at the tail of the tape a little bit further, we know that both these wide receivers offer Daniel Jones very different perspectives in the passing game. Pierce, 157 career receptions, 297 targets, 2,934 receiving yards, 17 touchdowns in those 64 contests. Now let's take a look at Josh Downs. 198 receptions, 292 targets, 2,140 receiving yards, 11 touchdowns, 47 games. Now, Downs, it comes down to the Daniel Jones factor. And Daniel Jones, we know that he's coming off an Achilles injury. So there's a good chance that this Colts offense will get the ball out of their quarterback's hands faster than normal. We're talking about running the game, short screens, everything that you want to talk about there. Until Daniel Jones' mobility returns, I'm expecting this to be a Josh Downs-dominated passing attack. Short, quick passes in the intermediate areas of the field are going to be essential. And we know what Josh Downs does best, and that is create separation. And he'll be looked at early and often. Now, why does Downs break out? Why is that value right through the roof right now? It is a combination of the 111 vacated targets left behind by Michael Pittman's offseason departure. Now, with Pittman gone, Downs should be afforded even more opportunities to run from the slot. Last season, Pittman ran more than 30% of his routes out of the slot. Downs nearly indefensible in that area of the field. Now, Downs' competition, we know Colts, they parted ways with Pittman there. They really didn't add anyone for competition for Pierce or Downs in the passing game as of yet. Now, the only notable addition, if you want to call it that, is Nick Westbrook-Akine there, who has never had more than 540 receiving yards in any season. And the Colts, they did select Deion Burks, but that wasn't until the 7th round. Another wide receiver that I feel good about, next up, if you will, how about Wan'Dale Robinson, one of my favorites. And I feel like I've been talking about Robinson now for 3 years as a breakout wide receiver. He's literally the Rodney Dangerfield of fantasy football. He ain't getting no respect by anybody anywhere. New beginning, new times, going from the New York Giants to the Tennessee Titans offense. You think that'd be kind of a bad kind of sideways lateral movement? But it's all about Cam Ward's success, not only for the future, but for the 2026 season. These new opportunities, this new Titans offense, Carnell Tate. We talk about the return of Calvin Ridley. We've also got a couple draft selections last year, Shamir Adik and Alec Amenyera. Now, during Ward's rookie campaign, the Titans franchise quarterback dropped back 540 times, completing 59.8% of his passes. And of those 323 completions, no pass catcher caught more than 56 of them. That means there's plenty of opportunities for Robinson, even though Carnell Tate happens to be there. Wide receiver 3 sets. Hey, Dyke and Manor, potentially they're both going to be bench bound here as we're looking at Calvin Ridley, Tate, and Robinson operating out of the slot. That's going to open up an additional 163 targets, along with 79 vacated targets from Chigakonko. In this scenario, Tate, he could have somewhere between that 90 to 100 target range, which is going to leave Wan'Dale Robinson with 140 targets, which is exactly what he had in New York. Speaking of that time in New York, as a Giant, 2025, 92 receptions on 142 targets, 1,014 yards, 4 touchdowns. That resulted in 217 fantasy points. Wide receiver 14. Yet, for some reason, here in the early parts of the season, we're talking about a wide receiver that's going as a back-end wide receiver 4, maybe a wide receiver 3 if you're lucky. That's right, a high-end wide receiver 2 with a wide receiver 4 value baked into it. Points per game basis, Robinson, wide receiver 17, averaging nearly 13.6 fantasy points per game. And that was with Jackson Dart, the ghost of Russell Wilson, and Jameis Winston all taking turns under center. Now, what really kind of sets things apart for Wan'Dale Robinson is if we take a look at Cam Ward's tendencies in college. The former Washington State and Miami product wasn't shy when it came about getting the ball to his slot receivers. At Washington State, we're talking about the second highest slot target rate, and at Miami, the highest slot target rate. And that we saw that already kind of transfer into the National Football League, as Dyke, he basically finished second on the team in receptions, 48 of them, despite not becoming a starter until week number 6. Now, up next, I'm going to give you not 1, not 2, but 3 more wide receiver sleepers here that you could trust that you should be targeting here moving forward. The first of those 3 wide receivers, how about Quentin Johnston, Los Angeles Chargers, 14 games last season. Johnston simply produced. What did he produce? How about 171.2 fantasy points? That's 12.2 fantasy points per game, finished as the wide receiver 30. That's 12 spots clear of his current ADP. We're talking about a ceiling in which he had 7 of his 14 contests in which Johnston topped 15 fantasy points. That's the type of fantasy production that can give fantasy managers one of the best returns on their investment. Now, how can Johnson outperform that ADP? There's several reasons to believe that Johnson can once again outperform his ADP. 1, hey, his ADP is not that high. 2, the Mike McDaniel factor there. He takes over for play calling, one of the brightest offensive minds in the entire National Football League. Under McDaniel's guidance, both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle were productive fantasy producers. Then there's the vacated targets aspect of it. Keenan Allen, he's not projected here to return to this team, and that suggests a large percentage, if you will, of those 122 vacated targets could find themselves heading in Johnson's direction. And Johnson, he caught 51 of 85 targets last season, and even if you were to inherit just 25% of Keenan Allen's vacated targets, that still puts him around that 110 to 115 range. And we've got here the underrated reason here. No one ever talks about the offensive line. Let's give the big guys their due. We're talking about quarterback protection. We're talking about Joe Alt here. We're talking about Rashawn Slater here. We're talking about several returning pieces along that offensive line that is going to provide protection for Justin Herbert, which means that's going to afford him more time, which means more shots down the field, which means more shots in the back of the end zone, which means Johnson, he's on the path for 1,000 yards. Yes, I said it. 1,000 yards is perfectly in the possibilities of Johnson's 2026 season. I mean, we talk about a guy, 735 receiving yards last season. If Johnson can hit that milestone of 1,000 yards and then throw in his 8 touchdowns, which he had last season, 75 receptions, we're talking about 223 potential fantasy points, which would put him basically as a fringe wide receiver 1. Need another wide receiver? Hey, as one of the founding members of the Jalen Coker fan club, you knew that he was going to be on this list, and I have got receipts. I've been driving up Coker's ADP since he went undrafted his rookie season there. Coker, breakout coming? Absolutely, he's got a breakout coming. Well, Coker didn't necessarily technically break out last season. The signs were all there for the undrafted free agent out of Holy Cross to possibly be that guy this season. We're talking about a guy who climbed up the Panthers depth chart to the point in which he was featured opposite of Ted McMillan. Now, Coker, he did kind of get slowed down by injuries there, and that kind of hurt his fantasy football kind of prospects. But Carolina Brass, they were still impressed, and they're not going to disrupt the apple cart. What did they do this season? They signed John Mechie III. They selected Chris Brazzell there the second in April's draft. Still, none of those additions are a threat here. And Xavier Legette, forget about it. They've invested him in 2024. He has yet to return any kind of value on that investment. And we do know that Brazzell or whatever you want to call him, he's out now for the season, which means they're going to need to lean on Coker and McMillan even more. Now, we talk about how impressions and how important they are in the fantasy world. For the most part, fantasy managers, we are a fickle bunch, right? We'll call it the way it is. What have you done for me lately is kind of the mantra out there. And well, the last time that we saw Coker take the field, he was absolutely terrorizing the Rams secondary. You want to talk about that wild card performance? 134 receiving yards. 9 receptions, 12 targets, a touchdown, 28.4 fantasy points in that wild card showdown. And the metrics from week 11 through that wild card game, Coker averaged 57.8 receiving yards per game, wide receiver 25, 2.03 yards per route run, wide receiver 22, 13.3 fantasy points per game, wide receiver 17. And he did that all while technically sitting behind Leggett in 2 wide receiver sets. We know Dave Canales loves himself some Coker, and you know he's moving up that depth chart, surpassing Leggett fairly easily. And he's one of the few guys out there that in this range of guys you're drafting with their ADP who has 1,000-yard potential. I mean, if we use that 9-game sample size there to kind of at the conclusion of the season, Coker could be viewed as a receiver with a floor, not a ceiling, a floor of 900 receiving yards. We're talking about a guy who's going to be the second option in this Panthers passing game, and there's a strong possibility that Coker easily outperforms those expectations. And if he's healthy for 17 games, he could become the 13th undrafted free agent to record 1,000 yards receiving in a single season. Hey, we got time. How about one more? Jalen McMillan. While we're on this subject, guys, I've been banging the drum for him. One of my Bullets Takes Twitter, March 28th, 2024. McMillan is this year's Puka Nacua. He's everything you want in Roman Dunze at half the price. I got the receipts. I'm a man of my word, and I refuse to back down from that statement. Now, McMillan is hurt once again, so I reserve the right to change that choice there to Ted Hurst in the future. But right now, I'm sticking with my boy. We're talking about a guy. If we're looking for those wide receiver sleepers, we look for some big names, vacated targets, opportunities, ADP discounts, role changes, and most importantly, a path to volume. And that's what Coker has in bunches. Now, that's it for today's show, but make sure you're following Fantasy Football Quick Hits to catch all the latest episodes and get that inside advantage to overtake your fantasy league mate. On our next episode, we're going to take a look at some of the dark horse tight end options that fantasy managers could be looking at here in 2026. We'll see you next time.